Shalom, brothers and sisters. Grace be unto you and peace from Yahuwah the Father and Yahusha the Messiah, his Son. This is Brother David coming to you again, not to bring you a word, but to bring you a question. And the question is, did the Apostle Paul say that? And this is part 4. Now, coming from part 3, we see that there was a law of the Spirit, right? Now we understand why most people do not keep the commandments, because they do not have the Spirit of the Mighty One. And the only way that you will not continue to sin is that you have to have his Spirit. That's what walking in the Spirit is. That's what the law of the Spirit is, brothers and sisters. He shall write these laws upon your heart. Now we're going to continue. We're going to deal with diet in this segment. I'm out there every day, brothers and sisters, talking to people, and I hear what they say. Do you know that they know all of the lies, yet none of the truth? They know the single verse, but they never know the context. They've never even read it. Most of the time, they get their information secondhand. Brothers and sisters, I must tell you the truth. You have to check everything out for yourself. Men are prone to make mistakes. Everyone. Then you have those who are totally deceived that will lead you into destruction because they don't know anything. And they give you the knowledge that they have, which is zero. They transfer it to you, and you take it as gospel without even checking it out. This behavior cannot continue. This is why I make these videos, to try to teach you that you have to study. You have to read context. Without context, you can't understand what the author is trying to bring across to you. That's why you have to read the whole thing. Sometimes when you read the letters or the epistles of Paul, because they are a letter, letters have flows. Sometimes you would have to read the whole Ephesians just so that you can get the point, because it's a letter. It's a continuation, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Man is the one who's separated in these chapters. Here's another thing. We always have the letters that Paul wrote to the different people in Ephesus, Philippi, Colossae, Galatia. But we never have any of the letters that they wrote back to him. Where are those letters? Those letters are absent because it would show who the people are that was writing to Paul. They were Israelites, brothers and sisters. They were not Romans. Just because the book of Romans is named Romans, it doesn't mean that he wrote to the Romans. The Messiah told him to go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. All of them has this command, even Paul. Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles. And every time we hear the word Gentile, we forget about the northern kingdom that went a-whoring after the other gods, and the mighty one. He turned them over to their own lusts, and he named them Gentiles because they had went totally out of his covenant. Now we're going to address some diet here. Let's see if Paul said that we can eat pig, shellfish, and all of the other abominable things that you stir up in a pot. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 27. If any of them that believe not bid you to a feast, and ye be disposed to go, whatsoever is set before you, eat, asking no question for conscience sake. Now, if you were to read this passage, this verse alone, without reading the context, you would say, oh, Paul said that if you go to a party or a feast and they're eating pig and shellfish and some good old barbecued ribs. Whatever is set before you, eat, and don't you ask any questions for conscience sake. Now, brothers and sisters, this is a broad statement. If Paul is saying that whatever is set before you, that you can eat it now, that it's good for food, and you're not to ask any question for conscience sake, then it must be okay for this. We're going to have, for an appetizer, a plate of sauteed sesame, gingered, sauteed roaches. Doesn't that look delicious? And our main course for today is going to be deep fried rat with sauteed onions, white rice, and a side of hash brown potatoes. Man, this is finger-licking good. Now remember, Paul told you that whatever is set before you, eat. And don't you ask any questions. So we know that there's something wrong with that statement, right? Just by looking at this analogy here alone, we know that there must be something more to it. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and 28, one verse down, brothers and sisters. Let me say it again. One verse down, you get your answer. But the church doesn't read context. They don't read what's before, nor do they read what's after. They'll take that one verse and they'll run with it. Verse 28. But if any man say unto you, this is offered in sacrifice unto idols, eat not, for his sake that showed it, and for conscience sake, for the earth is Yahuwah's, and Yahuwah is the master of the universe, and the fullness thereof. So now Paul has clarified his statement. The only way that you would know what he's talking about is to read context. This is context. So what was Paul talking about? Was he telling you you can have an appetizer of roaches sauteed in sesame ginger sauce, and your main course is going to be deep fried rat, that, yeah, you can eat that? No. He was talking about things that were sacrificed unto idols. You see that? But then he defines exactly what he's trying to say here. He says, if any man say unto you, remember, you went to this feast. You wanted to go to this party with these unbelievers. When you sat down with them, he told you to eat whatever is set before you, asking no question for conscience sake. Now in verse 28, he clarifies his statement. He's telling you, if a man say unto you that this has been offered in sacrifice unto idols, don't you eat it. For the sake of the one that showed it, let's start here and let's deal with the one who showed it. Why did he say that? Why did he say, eat not for the sake of the person that showed it? Because you are a believer. You are the children of Israel. You have laws, statutes, and commandments to follow. You have to set an example for this unbeliever. The earth is Yahuwah's and the fullness thereof. Therefore, we don't eat things that have been sacrificed unto other gods. And then he says, and for your conscience sake. You don't want to go home and you feel like you violated the laws, the statutes, and commandments. So he says, don't you eat it then. Now, I want to show you something, right? We're going to jump up and read some more context. And when you go to verse 19, look at what it says. What say I then? Question. That the idol is anything? You see, he's talking about idols. Remember, this is context. This is before we got to verse 27. Or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything? Question again. Now he's talking about things that were sacrificed to idols, brothers and sisters. Something's wrong with the church. It's like they have no reading comprehension. Verse 20, but I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils. Now do you see, brothers and sisters? He's not telling you that you can eat everything. He's not telling you. He never defined and says, well, the mighty one has cleansed the shellfish. He has cleansed the buzzard. He has cleansed the pork. No. He's just addressing things that were sacrificed unto idols and things that were sacrificed unto these demons and devils. Do you see this? And not to the mighty one. And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. Remember, this is context. If you read verse 27, it seems like Paul is giving you the right to go to these parties with these Gentiles, with these people who are sacrificing things to demons and devils, but he's not. He's telling you that he wouldn't let you go. He would tell you not to. Do you see this? Let's go back to 27. If any of them that believe not bids you to a feast, and ye be disposed to go, he just told you. He would not have that you should go to these parties because they're trafficking with demons and devils. Whatsoever is set before you, eat, asking no question, for conscience sake. Now, brothers and sisters, when you read the context, we read 28, which came after. We read 19 and 20, which came above. You find out that he's talking about things that were sacrificed unto idols. He never spoke about shellfish. He never spoke about pig. He never spoke about buzzard and all the abominable things. He didn't speak about roaches and rats. He was talking about things that were sacrificed unto idols. Nelson's New Illustrated Bible Dictionary. Meat was often sacrificed on pagan altars and dedicated to pagan gods in Paul's day. Later, this meat was offered for sale in the public meat markets. Some Christians, not Christians, Israelites, there was no such thing as Christians. This is all created by the Europeans placing these words like Christians in the Bible. They tried to include themselves. Wondered if it were morally right for Christians. No. Israelites, brothers and sisters. Once you do a little more study, you'll find out that everything and the only people he's speaking to is the children of Israel. They are the ones with the covenant, the contract. No one else have it. They are his people. Nobody else are his people. He only came to redeem. Means return. He came to return them back to himself. To eat such meat that had previously been sacrificed to pagan gods. So this was common in the days of Paul. They were sacrificing bulls and goats and lambs upon the altars to their gods. You see that? So this is a regular occurrence. If you don't read context, if you don't check history. If you don't define words, you will be lost. 1 Corinthians 10:28. But if any man say unto you, this is offered in sacrifice unto idols, eat not for his sake. That showed it. Remember, we addressed that. You have to set an example and show them that your Father does not like this behavior, and for your conscience sake also. You see? You have to make sure that your conscience is clear. And then Paul gives you the explanation for the earth belongs to Yahuwah and the fullness thereof. Now, did you see any place in any of these passages where Paul says that it's okay, the dietary laws have been changed, they've been abolished, now you can eat pig and shellfish? No. Paul was addressing things that were sacrificed unto idols, to demons and devils, and he also was addressing something else. He was telling you not to be in fellowship with these demons, but if you decide to go, you're going to have to eat whatever is put before you, asking no questions. But if that man say to you that it's been offered to idols, you now to set an example and tell them that this is not right before your master. Romans chapter 14, verses 1 to 4. Now, we just debunked one scripture before in one of their doctrines where they try to tell you that you can eat all things. Now, let's look at another one that they use. Verse 1. Him that is weak in the faith receive ye, but not to doubtful disputations. For one believeth that he may eat all things, and another who is weak eateth herbs. Verse 3. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let him not him which eateth not judge him that eateth. For the mighty one hath received him. Let's just stop right here for a second before we go on, all right? He's telling you that the weak person in the faith, he wants you to receive them, not to cast them away. Don't get into these disputes over small things. Verse 2, he tells you something about the person who eats. He says that one believeth that he should eat all things. Is he talking about shellfish, pork, and all of the abominable things? Buzzards, roaches, rats? No. Paul here is addressing a certain issue. Look at next, and I'm going to tell you what it is. Another who is weak. You see the person who they're saying who is weak, that you should receive, only eats herbs. In other words, he only eats vegetables, the weak person. He's telling you that you have to receive this person. Do you understand that this dispute still goes on today? The people who eat meat and vegetables look down on those who only eat vegetables. And guess what? The ones who just eat vegetables, the vegans, they look down on the people who eat meat. And both of them say that they don't want anything to do with the other because they're so different from each other. But look at what it says in verse 3. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not. So the one who eats meat and vegetables is not to despise the one who doesn't eat meat. Do you see this? And let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth. So the one who only eats vegetables, the vegan, should not be judging the one who eats meat. For the mighty one have received him. It tends to suggest that in that day they were trying to say that eating meat, if you weren't a vegan, that you were eating things that were unclean. But that's not what the problem was here. The problem was that the people had no knowledge, so Paul was trying to straighten them out. If you don't eat meat, that is fine, but don't throw it on your brother. And if you eat meat, that's fine. But don't despise your brother because he does not eat meat. Verse 4, who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth. Yea, he shall be holden up. For the mighty one is able to make him stand. Brothers and sisters, is there any place here that you see that Paul is telling you the dietary laws have been abolished? Now you can eat shellfish, buzzard, rat, roaches, pig, and all of that is okay. No. When you have reading comprehension, then you can see that Paul here is trying to quell a dispute between the vegans and the ones who eat meat. Verse 5. One man esteemeth one day above another, and another esteemeth every day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He that regardeth the day, regardeth it unto Yahuwah. And he that regardeth not the day, to Yahuwah he does not regard it. Now, in verse 5, this is something totally different than what we were just talking about, right? We're not talking about a vegan versus one who eats meat and vegetables anymore. They must have had two issues that they wrote Paul about. So Paul is addressing both issues. Look at the beginning of verse 5 here. One man esteemeth one day above another. Do you know what that day is, brothers and sisters? That day is the Sabbath day, the seventh day, the one that the Father himself set apart from every other day of the week. Look at the second part. Another esteemeth every day alike. Let's stop right here for a second. Do you see the duality here? In everything that Paul does and everything he says, when you start reading the scripture and understanding, have reading comprehension, and above all, have the Spirit of the Mighty One, you will always see the duality in scripture here. Paul gives you a choice. Will you choose the Father's ways, or would you choose the ways of men? Look at the man that esteemeth that one day. He takes it above every other. All week long, he gets prepared for that day. During Friday morning, straight on through, he's preparing for the Sabbath day so that he can rest. He's preparing his meals. His house is being cleaned, clothes are being washed. Everything is in preparation for that day. But then you have another man. He's the one who esteemeth every day alike. When you speak to people in the streets, the ones who are Christians, do you know that this is one of their defense mechanisms for not keeping the Sabbath day? They say, I worship every day. Every day is the Sabbath to me. Whose way is that, brothers and sisters? Is that the way of the Mighty One, or is that the way of a man? That's the way of a man. Because the Mighty One told you that you are to set one day separate from the other. If you esteem every day alike, You have to work, don't you? So you can work 6 and 7 days, then come home and talk about, well, I'm going to read my scripture, I'm going to worship, and I'm going to pray. Is that esteeming? Is that esteeming the Sabbath day? Is that setting it apart? Of course not. The Sabbath day, you prepare all week just to get to that day. And when Friday comes, you have everything done. Your dinner is cooked. You'll boil what you can boil. You'll bake what you can bake. You will not go out into the streets after the Sabbath starts to go buy, to go party, to do anything else. You will stay home, fellowship with your family, eat dinner, and study the scriptures. But the person that esteemeth every day alike, he goes to work, he does all of these other things. He does not esteemeth this day to the Father. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. Here's your choice. This is the duality the duality that's in Scripture over and over again. You can choose life or you can choose death. The second man always chooses death. Verse 6. He that regardeth the day, he that esteemeth the day, he that set aparts the day, he that reverences the day, regardeth it, reverences it unto Yahuwah. You see that? The first man, he esteemeth that day unto the mighty one. Look at the second man. And he that regardeth not the day, to Yahuwah, he does not regard it or esteem it or reverence it. This is an indictment. This doesn't tell you that you can have every day alike. No. It's telling you about a person who reverences the day of the mighty one and one who just totally disregards it. He doesn't care. Every day's alike to him. I'll work and I'll do all the same things I've been doing all week. He doesn't even understand how the Sabbath day works, brothers and sisters, because he has nothing to do with the mighty one. Verse 14. I know and am persuaded by Yahusha the Messiah that there is nothing unclean of itself, but to him that esteemeth anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. Now, if you were to take this verse here by itself, you could probably try to twist it and make it into something ugly, into a doctrine, because it's saying that, hey, Paul is saying, I'm convinced that there's nothing unclean in itself. Remember something, if Paul is saying that, then you can eat a side of roaches with your main course, rat. Maybe you can shoot down a buzzard and eat that. You can have any abominable thing that creeps and walks upon the earth, because nothing is unclean unto itself. But we read context already, right? We know that he's not talking about just anything. We know this for a true fact, because this here is not a broad statement anymore, because we've read the context. Look at verse 15. It brings it home. But if thy brother be grieved with thy meat, here, see that? We went right back to it again. The vegan versus the one who eats meat and vegetables. Now walkest thou not charitably? You mean to tell me that you're not going to have compassion on your brother? If he's grieved with your meat, you should put it away. You should not be eating meat. You should just eat vegetables with him. When he comes to your house, serve a vegetable meal. Look what it says next. Destroy not him with your meat. Don't mess his conscience up. Don't mess his faith in the Messiah up. He is weak in the faith. Don't destroy him with your meat. Because the Messiah died for him also. You must keep in mind the infirmities that your brothers and your sisters are dealing with, brothers and sisters. So look at this. Have you seen any place here where Paul has said that the dietary laws have been abolished? Do you see any place here? This whole thing, read the whole Romans chapter 10. See if you can find something where he says that it's changed now. The Father has made all these things clean, and you can have them for meat. It does not exist, but I want you to check it for yourself. You have to check behind me. What is the problem with the church? They don't have reading comprehension, brothers and sisters. They don't read context, nor do they have the Spirit of the Mighty One. Because if this is the case, then Spot is on the table. Your neighbor's dogs, your dogs, they're good for food. You better be careful. Because we're going to have us some baked dog for dinner. And not, you know how we used to have oxtails? No, we're going to have dog tail stew. This is ridiculous, brothers and sisters. Do you see how stupid this doctrine is? It makes the church look like a bunch of fools because they're believing in this with no investigation, with no reading comprehension, and no spirit. For one believeth that he may eat all things. If you listen to the church, all things means the pork, the shellfish, the buzzard, all of those things. And another who is weak only eats herbs. This here describes exactly what the conflict was all about. One who eats meat and vegetables, and one who eats only herbs. Acts of the Apostles, chapter 10, verses 9 to 11. Now let's get into the famous scripture here. This is the one that the church uses. Maybe you didn't know about the two that I just read to you before, but let's get to the famous scripture because this is the one that everyone that I come about in the streets when I tell them that they're not to eat these things anymore, they go to Peter. So no longer is it Paul said, but now it's Peter said. Verse 9, on the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. Verse 10, and he became very hungry and would have eaten, but while they made ready, he fell into a trance. He went to sleep. Verse 11, and saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners, and let down to the earth. Verse 12, wherein all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air, that's your roaches, your rats, your buzzards, your pigs, all of these things were in this vision. And there came, verse 13, and there came a voice to him, rise, Peter, kill and eat. Rise, Peter, slay and eat. Everybody in the church knows this scripture. Everyone in the church knows this loophole, this so-called loophole. It's not really a loophole. They've falsified the scriptures. They've twisted it to their own destruction. Verse 14, but Peter said, not so, Master, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. You see this? Peter is telling them, He's never eaten anything that is common or anything that is unclean. Anything that the master said that is not good for food, Peter did not touch it. Verse 15, and the voice spake unto him again the second time, what the mighty one hath cleansed, that call not thou common. Hold it 1 second. Hold it. What the mighty one hath cleansed. Did the mighty one, have you ever seen any scripture in the Bible where it says that God, the mighty one, that he cleansed shellfish, that he cleansed pork and buzzards and rats and roaches, and he says, now you can eat this? Because what the mighty one has cleansed, don't you call it common or unclean. Verse 16, this was done thrice, 3 times he did this. And then the vessel was received up again into heaven. Now, brothers and sisters, it never said any place here where the Father is telling him that you can eat pork. But if the person who is unlearned reads this, they'll say, oh, the Father has cleansed this. He never says this. He says, what the mighty one have cleansed. Show me what he's cleansed here. Do you see anything that is cleansed? You have to learn to read context, or else you will be eating barbecued rat. Doesn't that look finger-licking good, brothers and sisters? Put a little barbecue sauce and some onions. Man, my mouth is just watering in anticipation for this wonderful meal. Verse 28. Let's check out the explanation. See, this is what the church does not do. And even if they do read a little further, they don't have any reading comprehension, so they'll never see it. And he said unto them, ye know how that it is unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew. Listen to the explanation. For one that is a Jew, not Jew, is Israelite. This term Jewish came about in the 18th century. It never was in the Bibles before that. This is something that is new. To keep company or come unto one of another nation. Now, we just addressed this before with Paul. Paul told you, he says, if there was any unbelievers, invite you to their party and you be disposed to go. You have to eat whatever is set before you, not asking any questions. But once we read the context, we know that he was talking about things that were sacrificed unto idols, things that were sacrificed unto demons and devils. He told you, I would not have you to go unto these people. But if you be disposed to go, then you have to eat whatever they set before you. Here it is, Peter was having the same issue, a similar issue. He didn't want to go to the Gentiles. That's who this other nation, Gentile means nation. He was from the tribe of Judah, and it is unlawful for them to keep company with the northern kingdom. That's who he's talking about. That's who these Gentiles were. But look at what the mighty one said next. But the mighty one have showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Let me say it again. That I should not call any man common or unclean. Any man common or unclean. You see? When you read the context, you find out that he's talking about men. The mighty one used an analogy, a parallel, to show Peter unclean things. And he says that if I cleanse this thing, you can't call it unclean anymore. He used food because Peter was hungry, so it was the best way to get to him at that point. Peter understood what was happening. The problem is the church does not understand anything. They have no reading comprehension. What was he talking about? Not to call any man common or unclean. 29. Therefore came I unto you without gainsaying, as soon as I was sent for. I asked therefore for what intent ye have sent for me. So Peter had a problem going unto them first. But after this dream that he had, and the mighty one showed him not to call any man common and unclean, as soon as he was sent for, he went to find out exactly what it is that they needed him for. Do you see this? Brothers and sisters, we have been deceived for so long. But we have his spirit now. We've learned how to study. We read context. We look up words. We go into history. We go into archaeological evidence. We check everything today. Well, at least some of us. When you check everything, then you can understand what the Father is saying. The church takes one little verse. Rise, Peter, slay and eat. To mean that the Father is telling him, eat anything, shellfish, pork. No, the Father explains himself in verse 28. But what the mighty one hath showed me, this is what Peter is saying, that I should not call any man, not food, man, common or unclean. Verse 34. Listen to this. This here strengthens my position. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, of a truth I perceive that the mighty one is no respecter of persons. Are we talking about food here, brothers and sisters? We're talking about people. Don't call any man common or unclean. Now he's telling you that the mighty one is no respecter of persons. Verse 35. Is he talking about everyone, by the way, brothers and sisters? No, he's going to clarify himself. But in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness. What is righteousness? Righteousness is keeping the commandments. That's what righteousness is. Look it up so you can see for yourself. Look at all of the scriptures that are attached to that word righteous, and you'll find out that it's also attached to the law. And worketh righteousness is accepted with him. If you are not keeping the commandments, you are not going to be accepted. Verse 36, look who he sent his word to. The word which the mighty one sent unto the children of Israel, preaching peace by Yahusha, the Messiah of Nazareth. The word wasn't sent to the Romans, the Europeans. It was not sent to the Asians, the Chinese, the Japanese, and all the rest. It wasn't sent to the Africans, that's the children of Ham. He sent it only to the children of Israel. Brothers and sisters, you guys are the greatest thing on the planet, and yet you don't even know who you are. All of these years, we've been in a strong delusion, believing every single lie that they tell us. Don't believe them anymore. Study for yourself. As you see here, he's never said anything about diet. He's never said anything about that the law has changed. He's talking about people. He used food because Peter was hungry when he fell asleep. He used that as an analogy to wake Peter up, to let him know, don't you call the ones whom I've cleansed, the northern kingdom, the children of Israel, common and unclean. Yes, they did go a-whoring after other gods. Yes, they are far away from me. But I have sent my only begotten Son, Yahusha, the Messiah of Nazareth, and he has made peace with the children of Israel. They were two, they were split, but he came back to make them one, thereby making peace. So, brothers and sisters, if you think that you can still eat this thing here, look at him. He's laughing at you. He must be a part of the church. He says, come on, come and get it. Come and get some of these ribs. Because Paul said, and Peter said, but we just showed you that Paul and Peter said no such thing. Continue to part 5.